Hello, and welcome. Welcome to another Friday at Go Narrative, and I'm excited to be here. That's right, today we have got a homepage teardown for you with the power of 3D story. Anybody who knows me knows how much I am passionate about story, not just storytelling, but story itself. Story is the noun, storytelling is the verb. And if we don't get the story right, then when we tell it, it won't be right when we tell it either. Getting it right first, getting it clear, knowing it, making sure that everybody who needs to know it knows it, super, super important. And one of the best ways that we can find out somebody's story at the click of a button is to go to the web. And of course, nowadays, we also see sites surfacing up not just in search, in the traditional way, if you will, with Google and its friends, but also in AI. Citations in AI, for example, a whole new way for sites and expertise to show up on the web. However, the web is still a place where our home can be. And after you see something or somebody or a company show up in the citations, you start to get more curious and you end up visiting their site. Now, the homepage is the traditional way to think about that. And it still very much is that first place, that first impression. And of course, there's landing pages. Campaign landing pages, for example, would be another great example. However, that doesn't change the fundamental. And that fundamental is what you're saying clear? And is it clear to the people that you need it to be clear to? One of the big challenges the tech industry has always suffered in all of its forms, at least in the Silicon Valley years from the 70s and 80s until today, probably much further back than that. I can imagine the same challenges applying in the horse and cart days, if you will. But sticking with what we know and love, the tech industry has frequently struggled to go beyond those early markets. And there's the famous Gordon Moore crossing the chasm. And that's all about crossing the chasm from a place where you are communicating with people who get it, because they are also early adopters or even better, innovators, and are passionate about what you're doing. They'll jump in just to jump in. And one of the big mistakes that the tech industry has always made has been just that. Talking to that group of people is only ever going to get you so far. So how do we go further? Well, we need to cross that chasm. And crossing the chasm is not as easy as it might seem. And the reason why it's even referred to as a chasm is because of the difficulty. And the difficulty is that the people in the early majority and beyond, we won't go as far as the laggards and so on, but sticking with the early majority and then the majority and the late majority, the people in a market who could benefit from your product, who have the purchasing power to buy your product, aren't the same and don't look the same as the people who came before the chasm. And the trap, and the reason why the chasm exists, is when a company seeks to communicate in the same way to that different group of people. One of the big challenges that we come across, and I hear all the time, is I'm talking to a technical audience. And therefore, I need to talk in a technical way. Now, there is an element of truth in that. And in so much as if that technical audience is a innovator or an early adopter, if we're talking about technology and technical people who occupy that space, then yes, you can frequently get to that person faster and get to the details faster than you could with somebody who doesn't spend all their time in that space. But the people in that space still are people. And the challenge is, how do we communicate not with technology, but with people? And you could swap the word to or with to, because there is that projection. There is that initial step. And because of that, we have to be very mindful of the first things that come out of our mouth or are on our website, if you will. And the question really comes down to, do we just want to talk to the people in that market, that early adopter or even innovator market? Is that the only market and the only people that we are going after? The answer to this question, I generally find, is no. Most founders that I speak to would actually quite like to grow their business, and they'd quite like to grow their business beyond those early adopters, because not just because of the financial rewards, but the reason why most founders are in the business that they're in the first place, and let me know if this resonates with you, it's because they have a vision for how they can make things better. If you have a vision for how you make things better, then that vision highly likely extends out to the majority. You want to help a lot of people, right? You want to help, if not everyone, you want to help a lot of people. And that then starts to bump into another problem that we have. And that is, trying to talk to everyone means you talk to no one. The kind of two ends of the spectrum, being too specific and too technical, if you will, on one end of the spectrum, and on the other end of the spectrum, being too general. These are two traps that we fall into. And maybe it's because we're human beings and we're flawed, or maybe it's because we tend to like to put things in boxes, but we do tend to gravitate quite heavily towards those two ends of the spectrum: too much detail or too general. And one of the criticisms I've heard in the past of storytelling in particular, remember I said it's not just about the telling is the verb, it's about the story itself. One of the criticisms I've heard of using story as a tool in your marketing tool set or your founder tool set is storytelling is a general thing, a general way of communicating. It's too high level. It's not specific enough. It doesn't differentiate, and it doesn't really put itself to use as a tool that is going to help us talk about who we are because we're special. So that's one of the criticisms I've heard about storytelling. And I often will say, well, let's flip that around for a second, shall we? Do you want to be well understood? Do you want to be understood? Of course, the answer to that question is generally yes. And therefore, would it make sense to speak in the language that people understand? If I'm speaking English right now, for example, and if you are listening to this live or in a recording, if you don't understand English, you're not going to be sticking around for very long because it's not a common language between us, right? I'm not saying it has to be your first language at all. But if you don't understand English at all, then you're not going to get any value out of the sounds that are coming out of me. And therein lies the problem with a lot of attempts at communication on the web, in marketing and advertising itself as well. And that is, there's a lot of noise that comes at us. Does it do what we want it to do as a founder? And that's a question that I love to ask. What is your intent? Because if the answer to that question is, I just want to spend all of my time creating things that help innovators and only ever want to talk to innovators, then your approach with communication, your use of story is going to be quite different. And the problem of story and storytelling in this context then becomes the question, is this a valid tool? Is this something that is going to help me with my intent? And the answer is yes. How you deploy it is always going to be a bit different, because how we verbalize, how we express the story that we have is going to vary from one audience to another. I mean, an example that a founder bumps into all the time here is three particular audiences, right? There's the customer or the potential customer, of course. There's the team, right? And maybe you can think about partners and so on as well as a part of that. But the team of people who are responsible for inventing, making, building, marketing, and selling this product, and investors. That's another big audience. And whilst there should always be some commonality, some red thread that ties all these things together, otherwise you would literally be talking about completely different things with those three different groups of people. And I'm pretty sure we could all imagine what would happen if you were on the dog sled and two dogs went left and right and one dog went straight ahead, right? It's not going to be pretty. You want all of those huskies headed in the same direction. And that's that red thread. That's the thing that ties it all together. And that is also the red thread that we need to make sure that we're surfacing in our engagements out in the world. And of course, the website is the classic, almost at this point, a classic thing. Even with the evolution of search with AI, people will still come to websites. Of course, we get a lot of content will be serviced and searched up through AI as a search engine with the citations and so on. But I don't know about you, but I still want to go to the websites. If I'm fixing a panel in one of my vehicles and I'm looking for the specific details, I will find pretty quickly that the guidance I get within AI isn't specific enough. And I know that there's a forum where I can get somebody who's done it before and I can see the photos. Now, I have also found that if you push AI enough, you can get it to provide you more and more and more specific information. But it's also really good to be able to then go to the source of that that truth. And especially when it's the opportunity to connect with other human beings who've done it before. And that's another thing that our websites give us that ability to do, is that connecting with other human beings. And that is through things like testimonials, or customer videos, or as we talked about with Jeff last week on the show, the docutronica, which is a form of testimonial that really focuses on the experience and the emotional side of why people buy things, and expresses that in a way which includes music and a very specific way of editing that is very engaging. But these are all opportunities for us to communicate with our potential clients when it comes to the human beings who are a part of buying and using products, right? And we all look for the reviews when we buy a product. I don't know about you, but that's become a bit of a challenge recently. There's so many fake reviews, and like there's even services like websites you can use to tell if a product looks like it's got fake reviews. It's really sad, because the human testimonial, the human review is so valuable when it's real. The worst ones, I think, are the ones where Amazon products have been clearly swapped for a different product, and you're looking to buy like a lens cap, right? And the reviews are for wire coat hangers. Like you read down far and I think, hold on a second, this looks like a different product. And it's some company that's churned out some cheap item and then another cheap item, and then maybe even their account has been bought by somebody else to then try and sell another product. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. It's really a shame, because it's such an important part of how we buy, is we want that social proof. Like, if I'm going to spend money on this, has somebody else done it? Right? And that, by the way, is a key differentiating factor with people who are in the early majority, as opposed to the people who are innovators and early adopters. They need that. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard to get into the early majority. And there are some clever ways you can do it, right? But that's one of the reasons why it's so hard, is because testimonials are so important. What was that you said, Matthew? What was that about? There's ways to do it. Well, there's a place, not just for the documentary, there's a place for fiction as well. And I don't mean fiction as in lying. I mean fiction as in using the information that you have, the data, the evidence that you have, and delivering that in a way, in a story that shows how it can be, right? And anybody who's had the pleasure of working at one of the bigger corporations in the world, and I had this with both Microsoft and Intel, is there's often a big effort for envisioning and innovation. Like, where is the industry going? Like, how do we fit into this? Is obviously one of the big parts of that for those companies. But what do we visualize happening with the technology? And that's fun. And that's, if you've got the resources to invest in it, super cool. But you can also do that with new products. You can do that with scenarios that you're enabling with your technology. So as a founder, I would encourage you to think about, what are the scenarios we know people can benefit from? We've done the work, we've done the due diligence, we've done the research, we've got the input. We know, we just don't have customers that are prepared to stand up and talk about this yet today. Well, one is you can take an existing customer and literally strip out any identifying information. But if you don't even have a customer yet, do a prototype. What is the prototype testimonial, if you will, right? Just like you prototype products, just like you prototype next iterations of features and capabilities. Just like we can now prototype using AI and coding to do vibe coding, to prototype landing pages and home pages, and then do something in 2 minutes that would have taken us hours before, and then quickly then move on to the next step. You can do that with stories as well. So looking at websites is an incredibly useful way to get an insight into a company's head. And when we do that, we get to see some interesting things. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up our victims for today. And I'm going to be really clear on this. It's still hot here in Seattle. If you're responsible for your company's website, it can be a challenge to get everything up there whilst with all the other things that you're doing. If you're a startup, it's probably not your only responsibility. If you're at a bigger company, you might be fighting against different opinions, inputs, right? The bigger you get, the harder that can be. And there's a lot of things that can stand in your way, your well-meaning way of getting what you want up onto the website. And I also know that what we end up putting on the website is often a reflection internally of how we have structured and approached what we want to say. I'm a big fan of saying that nothing ever gets said inside a company that doesn't eventually make it outside a company. And that's not talking about IP getting leaked, although I'm sure it does. It's about when you have your intent will shine through. It's similar to the advice, which is, if you're walking into a challenging meeting at work or even with a spouse or a friend, if you are having a bit of a bumpy time in that communication or that relationship, work ones are really easy to think about because you could think about like wanting to get somebody to help you with something, or in a bigger company to buy in or to put budget against something. And you have to get people on the same page, all aligned. And in a startup, it's going to be getting investors on the same page. Maybe there's an investor that you're just not connecting with, or a board member that something's gone wrong and there's a certain impression and you're trying to correct things. And think about what OpenAI went through a couple of years ago as an example, right? CEO versus board, or some of board versus CEO, either way, but some kind of friction. If you go into those types of engagements with a combative mindset, if you go into those types of engagements with an aggressive, like trying to win, trying to prove yourself right mindset, that stuff shines through. Like, we're very transparent as human beings, most of us. There are some people who maybe aren't, and maybe there's certain psychological terms for that, but most of us are pretty transparent. And even when we try really hard to be nice, for example, if we have this burning frustration inside us, it's going to burn through our attempts at being nice. And so the advice there is be positive, right? Rather than negative, like this person's really ticking me off and I'm expecting another meeting where it's going to be an argument or whatever. Think about, what is your end goal? What are you trying to achieve, right? And then you start to get into this headspace of working together, focus on the problem, not on the person. And then all of that will shine through. And the same goes for your intent as a founder with your product. What is that intent? Are you trying to prove that you're the smartest person in the room? Are you trying to solve a big problem for humanity? Are you, notice there's a negative and a positive one there, right? Are you obsessing over how you're going to grow, right? Again, not in itself a bad thing, right? But if that is the intent right now that you're taking into, whether it's a meeting or it's directing the team or approving or not approving a website or mandating what has to happen on the website, you might be unable to let that stuff slip out. And as I've said, some people might be to prevent that slipping out. And as a founder, you are juggling a lot of balls. I get it, right? That the growth thing isn't going to go away just because you have to focus on what it is that I want to communicate my intent is here, right? And that being able to juggle all those balls, that's a big part of why you're a founder, right? Because you are able to juggle all those balls. You're able to harness all of that talent and that technology to achieve that goal, right? So the trick is, how do you make sure that you keep juggling and you keep the intent ball as it relates to your customers in play? Because there's micro intent and there's macro intent. And the micro intent would be the one specific thing, such as the growth or the feedback we've had from the board or whatever it happens to be. But the macro intent is what are we really trying to do here as a company? And I heard a great example of this today. I was listening at the gym, so proud of myself, dragged myself out, went to the gym. I was listening to Marketing Against the Grain podcast, a big fan of the podcast. And it was the Willow CEO was on. Willow, a voice-based AI dictation software. I've not used it, but I am tempted now that I've heard what they're trying to do with it. And he was asked the question what the team was focusing on. And he said, it was really interesting because the first part was, it was kind of addressing the elephant in the room, all the things that they should be focusing on as a company, right? Making the most of the AI, where AI is. So I'm sure that they're building or utilizing one of these providers, maybe API to GPT, OpenAI API, something like that. And so we've got to stay on top of that. We've got to be innovating as the industry is innovating. We've got to make sure that our user experience is really great, right? All things that need to happen, all things that need to be juggled by a founder to make sure the business is successful. He even mentioned customer support and how they how they use their product to do that, which was really cool. But the thing that jumped out at me and is so relevant for this conversation is he said, but what I've really been thinking about, and what I'm encouraging the team to think about, is because we believe voice is going to fundamentally change how we interact with technology. Just like he had talked about, and then he refers to, just like the keyboard changed it from having to, and many of you won't even get this reference, I'm sure, but punch cards, right? How we did input, and I never personally used punch cards, but I am old enough to know people that did. And a friend of mine, in fact, I work with quite frequently, has even told me stories about it. Shift from that to keyboards, and then the mouse, right, and video cameras, web cameras, all that good stuff. And so he talked about that. So he's like, that voice is going to fundamentally change how we interact with computers and technology. And so that's what I'm really thinking about. And then he went on to talk more about it. But my point is, this was very much that red thread that was tying everything together. And I was imagining how it would show up in the tactical day-to-day. And in fact, if we were to go to Willow AI, I haven't done this. Actually, I just listened to the podcast earlier. What is going on with the web? Like this page of AI. Let me try different. Let's try that again. I'm curious to look at their website because it's probably just willow.ai. Willow.ai. No. Okay. They haven't bought the domain. Maybe they're using the .com. So I'm curious. They're Y Combinator, is that right? Man. Okay. Nope. Hey Willow, is this it? Wow, they're buried. They're down there. Nope. Okay, I'm going to stop my attempts at doing that because that's really sad, because I'm sure if I pulled it up, we would see. Wow, that's so bizarre. Is this it? willowvoice.com. Okay, so let's have a look at their webpage, because I'm curious if what he said on the podcast, and it's a fairly recent podcast, I'm curious if that shines through, and we are going to find out together. Okay, make sure I'm clicking the right buttons. So here we've got it: save 1 hour every day by not typing. Okay, so promising to save me time. Thank you. We all want that, don't we? Rapidly talking about what it is so that we know. Fast, accurate, works on any app. So are we going to see anything? Your keyboard is slowing you down. Okay. High level, directly connecting to my narrative and probably yours and a lot of people who spend their time trying to do a whole bunch of stuff whilst being a parent. Not to diss on those who aren't parents, because then you just have a bunch of extra other things that you would fill that time with. If you're a motivated person that spends a lot of time doing stuff, and likewise, if you're not a motivated, unengaged parent, then that wouldn't be something that's taking time either, right? So I obviously feel the pinch of being a parent there, but it's also fantastic. So speaking to me, right? Speaking to you, and does that link up to that higher calling that he was saying that he encourages the team to do? What was that we said? It was how voice is going to fundamentally change how we interact with technology. There's a bit of an on-ramp to it. It's not explicit. Saving time, showing how it's changing. Technology, dictation, any app. So it's there. I'm not criticizing that, by the way. And what we do see, as soon as we get down here, though, your keyboard is slowing you down. Boom. And then there's some great story threads here. All these things that we all do. Typing was an unnatural workaround. So yes, here we are. Keyboard slowing you down. Typing was an unnatural workaround. We're seeing that red thread, that narrative shine through about what's shifting, what's changing. And while I don't talk about it a lot on these streams, one thing that we love working with our clients on is the TRIPS storytelling approach. And that is actually narrative level: transformation, reasons to believe, innovation, problems, and stories. And that transformation is talking about the market level transformation, the world level transformation. And it's not necessarily at your granularity. You're playing in it in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, let's take Willow. Maybe Willow have their own back end and they're doing their own model from scratch, or maybe they're using OpenAI, and both are completely valid and have benefits and different impacts in terms of running a business, right? But let's say that they're on a third party, that they're using the API. And in that case, just like the CEO said, we need to be taking advantage of these changes. That is showing this how the CEO of Willow is identifying the importance of that shift and that transformation, and that it's happening. And he's articulating it, right? So that's a part of the narrative. Here's the big change happening in the world, and here's how we're playing in it, right? Or here's how the big change in automotive is happening and how we're playing in it, right? You don't need to be at the absolute forefront building the model that the APIs are serving out to other companies. You don't have to be there to talk about it. You can be using the API and you can talk about it. You could be providing adjacent services that have nothing to do with AI, and you could take advantage of it, right? Because if what you're doing relates to it, then you can take advantage of that. And you, in so doing, by take advantage, what I mean is connect into a shared understanding and benefit from it. Connect into a shared understanding and benefit from it. That's what happens when you factor in the higher narrative level, okay? And without going too deep into the narrative side of things, you can then see when a company does that. Okay, so that was a bit of fun, right, to have a look at that. Now let's have a look at another website. I picked a victim here. They did not provide permission, but hey, this is a public website, and we are going to have a look at I was looking for the tab. Okay. Drum roll, please. I'll share this again. Okay. Idera recently got some more funding, Series A, I think it was, and this is what you'll find if you stumble across their website, maybe because you're intentionally going there, maybe because you search for something that they help with, right? Whether that's old-fashioned search or whether it's more of an AI citation. And what do we have here? What are we looking at here? Well, when I look at a website to do these teardowns, I'm looking for people. I'm looking for the human connections. One of the first things I'm looking for. And some websites we look at and it's immediately obvious and some it's not. And then I want to see if it's servicing just the early adopters, or it's serving a broader market, even if that market is a technical market. And I'm also curious and looking for the sales journey. So when we buy something, think about the last time you had to buy something very specific, very functional, like if you had to buy a paperclip, right? You know what you need. You know the thing inside and out as much as you need to, and you'll very quickly get down to how much it costs, but also things like how many do I get for what I'm spending? Are these just going to crumble and break? Has somebody like bought these ones from this company and they're like trustworthy? Like just kind of get a little bit of that, and maybe are they big enough to clip together the sort of paper that I have to clip? Very, very, very far down the sales cycle, right? You're living the story, like in and out about what you need this for, and you're rapidly able to get down there. On the other hand, if we look at this this industry, for example, and we ask ourselves something along the lines of, I'm in IT security, and I've been tasked with finding out how we can make sure that our CIO doesn't get stuck up on the stand again. And I may or may not have been searching for this exact topic, but because of the keyword purchases and so on, perhaps this is where I find myself. And if that's the case, then what I'm going to be looking for is I'm going to be looking for what my manager has told me I need to look for. And it may literally be keeping my CI off the stand. And so if that's why I'm coming here, then what am I looking for? Ask that question. Maybe it's a bit different. Maybe it's not keeping them off the stand. Maybe it's like we can't have our company be exposed again, like we were exposed. That could be another way of viewing it. And then you can think through what other examples might be as well. So when we come to a website, we've got to bear those things in mind, because great, we could use the website to sell to people that are probably already going to buy from us, or we can sell to people that maybe don't even know that they should be buying from us yet. And by doing that, and in this case, specifically what Adara are doing is they are security for Kubernetes and AI workloads with cloud infrastructure. And it was 15 million Series A, and led by M12. So that's Microsoft's investment arm. And it's all about this growing need for different layers of security, right? And security isn't a one size fits all for workloads and all of the things that we have as a company happening in the cloud that all have to be protected in different ways from different types of threats. And how do we make sure that that's built in from the ground up? So if you're somebody that is building in security from the ground up, then when you come to a website like this, you're rapidly going to be looking for, maybe it's proof points, maybe it's white papers, maybe it's comparisons, right? And you may well even find yourself going straight up to the docs and clicking on that. And you might also want to have a look at the blog. You'll quickly make a decision: is the blog more of a community or a technical or a business focus? In this case, why cloud data warehouses must run untrusted code in isolation, 120 seconds with new Adara board advisor. And we got more down here as well. Apple's private cloud compute versus confidential. So it looks like some pretty detailed deep dives that I could get into here. Thought I saw Kubernetes mentioned in one of those. Okay, we've got lots of little indicators here, things that people are worried about. Great. So I can get really deep into the details. But what if I look at that blog and I'm like, I'm not sure if this keeps my CIO out of jail. And then maybe I go to CrowdStrike and they somehow managed to do a better job of that. We did a CrowdStrike teardown, by the way. And if you remember, not this past summer, but the summer before, there was a massive outage that was linked to CrowdStrike. But the point being is, if the intent comes across and it connects with me, then I'm going to stick around, right? And then, of course, there's the doc. So I know I can get into here. I can see, okay, concepts, how-to guides, so I could get deep down into the technical side. But again, what about the top of the page here? So move fast, don't break things. That's interesting. It's kind of not a million miles away from what we saw when we had a look at the Willow. It's connecting to me as a DevOps person, in this case, or an innovator, somebody who sees themselves as innovative. If I've been tasked to keep our CIO out of jail, move fast, don't break things, that might speak to me. Oh, look, what just happened? Apparently, generic storytelling language connected with two very different audiences, but kept them on the website. And that's a bad thing? I don't think so. And by the way, this is me saying that I think this is pretty good so far. Anyway, production grade sandboxing that assumes breach, meet hardened runtime. Got pretty deep down into the weeds on this one. It's a little bit too far for my liking. You know, last week, we had a really great example where they got into the category and had earned permission to be there in the way that it was worded. This goes a bit too deep, a bit too fast, because you're going to lose audiences that don't know what these mean. And it's not always a technical person who's on point to try and get a short list of potential vendors together. Now, of course, anybody in that seat worth their salt nowadays is going to take this website, is going to dump it into AI, and is going to it's going to have a template for what they need, and it's going to ask AI to identify if that's on the website. If it is, pull it out. If it's not, identify the gap. Accelerate that thinking process. In the old days, we would have read the website and we'd have made notes, right? And you still should read the website and you should still make notes. You don't outsource the thinking, you accelerate your thinking, right? I like to view AI as a conversation with myself, like speed me up, right? Either way, you're going to process this website, the information on it, and you're going to see whether or not it's relevant. And some of that's going to be technical. Some of it is going to be the potential promises. And in this case, we want our CIO to stay out of jail. So now we're quickly into the problem. Detection-based security has become an industry-wide treadmill, endless tuning, chasing false positives, and retrofitting rules after compromise. Despite massive investments, breaches persist. It's time for a new foundation, security enabled in the runtime itself, where the execution be constrained and not just observed. Problem, solution, benefit. I've never been a big fan of that. I spent a lot of my time in my final years at Microsoft, like reshaping perceptions on how customer storytelling can be done so that it's not problem, solution, benefit. And the problem with problem is there's different types of problem, there's different layers of it. And there's something that I call the emo pyramid. This is very much functional layer of communication. This is not getting down into the problem for me as a person. Like, what is this causing, right? Okay, treadmill. I'll give you that. Chasing, okay, a little bit. So we're seeing it's not completely devoid, but then that's pretty much it. We're not getting down into the what is, like, when this stuff goes wrong, do I get a phone call in the middle of the night? Are we unable to process transactions? Does that cost us money? Like, what are the types of outcomes that this will have? And how do I feel about that? And feelings aren't fluffy. Feelings are functional. Feelings are connected to our the physical sensations and how we process the physical sensations in our body. Feelings are functional because they are a tool that we use as human beings to sense threats in our environment. And because feelings aren't fluffy, emotions aren't fluffy either, because emotions are the cerebral interpretation, if you will, of those physical feelings. And that's something I liked about their move fast, don't break things, because there's a bit of a dopamine hit there. Yeah, I get to move fast, don't break things. Avoid the cortisol, right? Avoid that hormone being released into my bloodstream. So I like that. And I see an opportunity to dial up how we really pull people in here. Because otherwise, the problem is you're relying on somebody who is deep enough into the subject to go to the documents, to go to the blog, to read everything, or use AI to help them read as much as possible, to pull down what they need, and you need the right frameworks to do that. You need to know what you're looking for, like false positives, for example, right, would be something that you would maybe be looking for in this case. Do all the websites, do all the vendors, the brands, do they all talk about false positives? If any are not talking about reducing false positives, then they might get struck off the list. So having the right language on your web properties is absolutely vital. It's even more important nowadays, I would say, with AI, because you're going to have more people not necessarily super deep. You're going to have more generalists who are doing the research, the scraping, the pulling together of the information to serve up as options into the business. And therefore, you as a business, Adara in this case, can have multiple campaign landing pages. You can spin those up much quicker. You can, rather than doing a campaign to 300,000 people that's very similar across the board, with only a little bit of personalization in the emails, for example, you could do not so much segments, but micro segments of 1,000 people, and then do 300 of them, and you could create with the same resources. And in so doing, then be talking about all of these different things and capturing the AI search citation engine. And that is an opportunity that we didn't have in the same scale before. And startups in Series A, definitely don't have that level of resource. You're not an enterprise yet. You don't have a marketing team that can run. You don't have an old-fashioned marketing team that can run 1,000 campaigns. But we live in 2025, so you do, and it's an opportunity to take advantage of. And so as you're hiring marketers and working with vendors, you want to make sure that you're looking for people who've got that ability to help you deliver on that. And when you're hiring marketers, you want to make sure that you're hiring generalists who are able to understand the whole thing, not just email, or not just search engine optimization, or not just web, right? And the beauty of Story is that it ties all of those things together, and it puts it together, packages it in a way that the human brain understands, just like we all understood that headline, didn't we? Move fast, don't break things. And then we lost the connection to the business, right? To the buyer. And that's the thing, is who is your buyer? Is it the person who is thinking production grade sandboxing, or is it a CIO or their buying team who looks at that and sees the same thing that they see when they see an open AI API, and when they see those on a spreadsheet, they don't care either way. These are features apparently that we're paying for, right? Let's zero-based budget that. Where are we getting the most value? Let's cut off at the knees. Who's your buyer? Because you're not just talking to the person who's using the product. And that is one of the big challenges with selling to technical roles is a trap. I don't want you to fall into that trap. I don't want you to fall into the trap of thinking that the only person that matters, the only person you need to speak to, is the smartest person at your customer who's responsible for this specific thing. They're not. And you do need to speak to them, of course, and I guarantee it, Adara are great at speaking to that specific role, but they need to speak to more, right? And so the hype here, this is PR stuff. Hardened runtime enables teams to move faster or minimize exposure risks or eroding customer trust. Adara is focused on hardened runtime protections, reflective broad industry move towards prevention. The team behind much of China Guard's engineering team, ChainGuard, has done it again, disrupting every existing product in the category. So praise at a technical level. We see them moving fast, stopping problems before they happen. But these are all things, stopping problems before they happen. That's like something else that could be lifted out and used to make this content stickier for a human brain, right? Whether that human brain is looking at it on the website or whether they're reading a report that AI has put together and is citing this, And the AI has picked up on it because it includes the whole picture, and it includes the impact on the business as well as the technology, because that's what that generalist is going to be looking for. You need to be talking to the generalists, because they are the ones who are putting together the templates and working with AI, who are doing the research for their leadership team. Oh, prevention. Prevention's so good. Every ping has a purpose. I like seeing the red lines, right? But let's make that a red thread that ties everything together. Let's see, do we talk more about prevention down here? Saving time and money. But again, what was the impact? When an attack path gets revealed, what happened? Like, this is what I hate to say, is when you are talking about features, strong isolation, secure container workloads, reduction of performance trade-offs, reduction of time and money spent, no shared kernel, no lateral movement. These are features. And once you start fighting on features, you lose, because it's Russian roulette. Somebody is going to, at some point, the bullet's going to come, and you're not going to be the vendor that gets picked. But if you engage that person holistically as a human being, and you get them to understand why you're better, not just what you do, then you win. So the feature game is a losing game. And there's so many catch-22s in the Series A space, because you have to prove that you can do it. You have to do it, and you have to prove that you can do it. And then you end up obsessing about that, and your intent is to make sure people know that, and you start to lose sight of what your real intent is, right? What is the real intent of Adara? By the community, for the community? What does that mean? I mean, I hate to say it, but it's got a bit of a buzzword feel to it, to me, like buzzword bingo. I mean, what does it say to me? It means it's people who are building stuff, using stuff, who are also talk to other people doing the same, and then it's getting created, like Reddit, Discord, technical roles. We know what you need kind of role, right? That aspect to it. So that in itself isn't inherently bad, but built by the community, for the community. So open source, innovation, actual contributors, these other projects. So this is a how. We talked about why, we talked about what. This is a how, and it can be a proof point, and it can be it is a positive proof point, but it runs at risk of, if you just say built by the community, for the community, and leave it at this, all it is a proof point. How does this serve the vision? How does this serve Adara's vision? How does this serve their intent? Is it because it's the community are a part of stopping these problems? Yes. What are the problems that they're stopping, right? Why are those important? And why should somebody care? And then you start to look at it more through the eyes of Lord of the Rings, and the ragtag group that was elves and dwarves and hobbits that saved the day, right? But whilst the fact that the benefit of having a hobbit, the benefit of having an elf, all those all came up in the story, those features all surfaced in the story, it was about the bigger goal of the threat to Middle Earth, of this dark time and this darkness, and of preventing that, and how that everything, what everybody loved, was going to get taken away. And we got shown that time and time again. And so whilst it's fun to think about the community that were involved in that from a story perspective, and it is, like, literally people who will want to go to conventions and dress up as elves and dwarves and hobbits and with big hairy feet, that there's value in that. There's value in community. But if J.R.R. Tolkien had just released a handbook on hobbits, elves, and dwarves and wizards, and described all their powers, he would never have got further than the Dungeons and Dragons community. No dissing on the Dungeons and Dragons community. Do not have a problem with the Dungeons and Dragons community picking on you purely for the connection of elves and dwarves and wizards, and the fact that that would have been an interesting resource for that community and would have stayed within that community. It wouldn't have breached through to the broader community and to the buyers who were able to fuel first the books and then the movies. And I'm not even saying this as a storytelling thing. I'm saying this as a feature. Well, I guess I am saying it's a storytelling thing. I'm not saying it like go and copy Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying all of the answers are in literature or all the answers in movies. They're not. And in fact, I'm quite passionate about saying that they're not. What I'm saying is you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And the risk and the challenge of being a founder at a startup, leading a startup, is you get sucked down into the mire, into the swamps and the marshes of all of the topics that you have to care about. And if you don't have a North Star or a red thread, whatever metaphor works best for you, to help pull all those things together, then you're going to have the Huskies pulling in different directions, like I said earlier, right? Everything's going to crumble. So looking at this site here, that's the kind of stuff that I'll do, and then I'll run that through. We'll run that as a through our GPT, custom GPT that we have, and so if I copy, here's a prompt I prepared earlier. So let's go in here and let's do this one. These pro tip, by the way, GPT-5 is available for your previous GPTs that you had in 4.0. You just have to make sure you go in and click on that and select auto, and then you'll be in 5. I'd also recommend go back in and rebuilding them. So in this case, let's paste this in, which oops. Okay, so we've had some pretty big learnings recently in terms of how the teardowns have been working. Like I said, in terms of like, don't outsource the thinking. Use AI as a thought partner. And we've been working to make sure that there's some things that we stay clear of in this and that need to be done to improve it. So this includes a little bit of extra in addition to our comment there, tear down for this site. And then something else that I like to do is, one of the problems is with pointing to a website with AI is it might get a cached version. If you get a cached version, basically what's in memory of the internet, then you're not going to have necessarily the latest and greatest. So it's always good to look at it. And if you're doing anything with AI that's similar to this in any way, for example, if you're on point to try and find a solution for your company, don't just put the URLs in, and get some screenshots too. So let's do a couple more. Almost there. Bit of excessive color. Okay, So we're about to see what the assessment of the website is against Go narrative frameworks like Emo Pyramid, our Power of 3D Story. Above the fold. Move fast, don't break things. Did you look at the images? Move fast, don't break things is the headline. And you have data platform. You got to keep an eagle eye on this stuff. It goes to show why if people just copy paste from AI, no bueno. You're going to bump into all sorts of problems. Okay, so visceral activation reassessment, real headline. Did it look at it though? Defaulted to the meta description. Okay. I chuckle because the number of times AI is like, oh, I did this thing. I should have done this. Yeah. Okay. I guess maybe I wasn't clear enough, which is related to putting more of the content in that you saw a glimpse of above. Is you do need to make sure that you're tuning it and shaping it and stay on top of it. And stuff's changing on the back end with these things, even if they don't change version numbers. They're growing, they're evolving. They're making sure that you keep an eye on things so that you don't break things. Okay. Physical sensation level, weak to none. Phrase riffs on Zuckerberg's old mantra. It's clever wordplay, not embodied experience. It doesn't summon the sweaty palms. So I still kind of liked the don't break things. We did talk about how it doesn't hit on the emotions, though, right? All the feelings. We talked about emotions aren't fluffy, right? I only just took the thing off the screen there, but as a headline, I would not throw the headline under the bus. But as soon as you're in the subhead space, you have this opportunity, right, to do that connection. So yeah, it implies risk. What break means, and we have an opportunity. That's what a subhead can be for, right? So maybe you're being a bit too harsh, right? So human difficulty, the implied difficulty, moving fast usually causes fragility, but never names the livid moment, broken pipelines, fire drills, public embarrassment, all of which we talked about, right? Move fast suggests speed, but doesn't show who suffers when things break. I mean, if we're going to be really critical, move fast also doesn't say regarding what, but we know that it connects with the audience and the broader audience. So, and it's because move fast is a narrative we understand. And I will always encourage you when you're looking at your narrative is how do you relate to other narratives? How can you, again, take advantage, and by advantage, I mean resonate with people faster through understanding, and move fast and break things both do that for good reason. So let's keep going because I want to see what it says about below the subhead, and let alone the below the fold. Self-contained, no word stakes. It's still on the headline. Okay, emo pass. It's not even clear here. No platform. The great headlines and subhead combos are able to actually hit all these. We had one last week. It was you earn permission when you connect well enough, quick enough. You earn permission to talk about yourself in your category and what you do within that above the fold space. So it's validating what we talked about with the emotions, desire, ship, fast, difficulty, breaking things, denouement, promises it won't happen, but never paints what relief will feel like. And that's the problem we talked about, right? Surgical rewrites, okay, move fast after ship models at full speed without... in your assessment, bring in more than the headline. Bring in all of the above the fold. You can use the screenshot of the headline for this, as it contains all the content above the fold. I think it did, didn't it? Let's check. Yeah, it looks like almost. Okay. We don't need to be specific about the fact that some of the copy in the hype was cut off, because it's got it, it can refer to it, and it sees that it's in there. But the above the fold, in terms of this stuff here, right, all of this is real estate for us to connect and engage. Subhead. Okay. Don't break things. Okay, so we talked about that. Confidence is posture, not as body sensation. Sweaty palms, red slack dot at midnight, pit in stomach. And these are all starting points, right? I'm going to think about, if we're talking about layered security and DevOps, we could say, do a quick search for DevOps roles who are responsible for security integration and I want to say especially the various layers in a cloud system and the surface area of attack. And I also want to say I want to understand some of the literal feelings, emotions. I'll write it this way: emotions, feelings, the actual pain as they describe when dealing with red team type emergencies. I'm thinking Reddit and other of the community, by the community. Communities could surface some of this. Be as specific as possible, but I want a brief one-page report. Ensure there is a bulleted list of the sort of gut punch feelings that these worst situations could manifest. Okay. Just a quick one, not a deep research or anything like that. Gut punch feelings. So every time period went down, chaos, half the team debugging random stuff, the other half asking, wait, what's broken? Overwhelmed, not my job to manage your workload. Knuckles wrapped, being too firm, not pushing priorities. That's an interesting one. That's really interesting. I'm not seeing any emotions though. Panic, frustration, guilt, strained lines. Okay. Okay, so let's take these. So cursory little search that we've done. And then, so the human difficulty, so that's what we're talking about. Relief made tangible from the human difficulty. Relief is intellectual, not felt. With market transformation, it's not showing that big picture. We talked about that, right? So all this this is all stuff that's I live and breathe, right? And having the tool of AI really helps accelerate this when we sit down and do this, and then looking at a site. So doesn't score very highly. Okay, fresh prospects. Lands here, sees clever headline, may smile but doesn't feel the stakes, won't understand why this matters. In-market buyer sees feature framing, feels safe but sterile, nothing signals we've lived your fire drills. So that's another thing to bear in mind, is like, are you connecting with the people who are making these comments, right? It's not just about building the features and making sure you tell these people about the features. It's about looking at things like wrapped knuckles, right? Because you can really work with that. So let's say, what if we took the below physical sensations and worked up some ideas. Below those, I've included some lived it quotes. Let's also see how we can upgrade the above the fold with at least the sentiment in the wrapped knuckles one, but beyond. Give me 3 potential landing homepage. Okay. Oh, I didn't do these ones. Oops. And these. Okay. Again, see how this is iterative, right? And we've even used 2 different inputs. Having a look at this one as well. Got to think about AI as a partner, as a team member, and you've got to manage it, and you have to bring your expertise to the table. And one of the things, I've got OneNote with just reams and reams of pages where I'll take it out, right? So for speed and clarity and simplicity, we're doing it all within ChatGPT here. I haven't brought Claude into the mix. I haven't brought Perplexity into the mix. I haven't pulled up my OneNote, taken out of there, worked on in OneNote, made some changes, made some notes, then come back. These are all things I would recommend that you do that will help you make sure that it's your work that's being accelerated, not outsourcing the work. I can't stress that enough, because otherwise, A, your work's going to look terrible. B, you're not going to know what you're talking about, because you'll put stuff out into the world that you don't understand. And C, you're just going to add to the general vibe of people who don't like or trust people who use AI for content. And I disagree with that opinion. As somebody who's neurodiverse, who's got dyslexia, who's got ADHD, I can move so much faster and more thoroughly. The stress levels, I'm able to reduce. The anxiety that I have over hitting send on an email, reduced. The excitement that I get to move an idea faster, to get something done in a day that would have taken a week, or in a week that would have taken 3 months. The thrill that provides me, the smile on my face and the warm feeling I get when I get the response I wanted from an email, because I was able to not be trapped in my own thoughts. And in email, I don't have the benefit of the interaction. In real life, it's very different, right? I can adapt. I can read the person. I can be more successful in that type of interaction. But in email, like that, fire and forget, and then wait and see what comes back, and then having what comes back be positive, like more so ever now than ever before in my life. Like the anxiety around email has just been lifting and lifting. So with that in mind, let's have a look at some of the initial ideas that we've got for a potential redesign of the copy, the story. Now, something that we don't have here, and I'm going to be really, really, really clear on this, something that we don't have here, we don't have a defined red line. We don't have a narrative. So we're kind of flying a bit blind here. We are relying on the connection to the community and the emotions, but we don't have that red line. And I want to make something up for us to use to show how important this can be as well. It's hard to do super quickly, but they say move fast, don't break things. They talk about the community. They talk about prevention before it happens. Prevention. So they've got to think about things. I was listening to this Cal Newport podcast, and he was talking about AI, and he was talking about pre-training, post-training models, and how logically it all made sense. And he said it was so useful, and I posted this on LinkedIn today. It was so useful to have a non-computer science person come in and validate his metaphor, I think it was, or to tell him that what he was doing didn't work and that he needed to come up with a better metaphor. And he did. And he said, the AI industry is kind of like a car. It's like we were being sold on these better and better cars, and that we were going to get this F1 car, but we got this Camry and it's being upgraded. So it's like a mechanic. So AI engineers were like innovating and pushing the industry forward, and they were engineers, and now they're stuck in this role of like being these mechanics. And the ability to identify something common like that makes sense out of something which is like pre-training, post-training, what all these things mean. So if we think about what we're working with here, with what our friends at Adera are doing, move fast, don't break things. What do they mean by production grade sandboxing that assumes breach? This is the predictive, right? Assumes breach. Like, it's kind of like reading the future. Move fast into the future. Don't break things. If you had a time machine and went back in time and messed something up, you could totally screw up everything, couldn't you? Like, I'm thinking like Marty McFly, or rather Biff. Meet hardened runtime. Hardened, so like it's secure. You can't get in. So it's all these things together. It's the impenetrable, predictive. Why my brain is kind of going to the latest Mission Impossible movie, and how the AI in that movie had structured the security to protect itself from being taken over. And what was kind of metaphors were we dealing with there? We had Tom Cruise's character being told it was about how he cared too much for his team, and that was being leveraged, and his weakness was being leveraged. He cared too much. If you care, you don't break things. Moving fast, caring, assuming, like predicting, like it's almost like the parent. It's almost like a parent. Parenting's come back into my head, doesn't it? Or a like we talked about wizards earlier, didn't we? So Gandalf, Lord of the Rings, right? Like not just a mentor, but like a guardian angel, right? So we've got so now we're starting to get into some potential concepts that could be good metaphors there, like the guardian angel steps in, stops the bad thing happening, and you can't mess with an angel. Hardened runtime of an angel. Move fast. So then we talk about prevention, stopping things before they happen. Guardian angel again steps in. You feel like you have the guardian angel that stopped the car crashing or whatever. Okay, by the community, for the community. It's almost like the angels, almost like there's also a community that will often see itself as being the purists, the pure. So it's like the pure angels, true, honest. Okay, so I'm going to write this down. Purity of a group of guardians, like angels, stepping in to stop bad things happening. And just so you know, this is all off the top of my head. Okay. Oh, I should share my screen again. So purity of a group of guardians like angels stepping in to stop bad things happening before they do. these angels protect with their wings an impenetrable shield. I cannot spell. We've already established that I'm dyslexic. And you know what? Yeah, I can figure that out. It doesn't matter. Okay. Let's upgrade and change if necessary. See, because I didn't even read them yet, did I? Stop the 2MKs, start shipping them. Because then the problem is that because we haven't got something special and unique, these might not get as far as we want. No more wrap knuckles, no more bottlenecks. You lived it, security advice. Let's upgrade and change if necessary. That's a Matthew hint. Change it. The group makes me think of, or the community makes me think of group of some kind of brilliant, positive, helpful influence. And then it was stopping things before they happen. Makes me think of guardians, such as she had a guardian angel that stepped in and saved her kind of vibe. And then the hardened concept. Oops, that was a really bad spelling. Hardened concept, the security, the feeling secure and protected is where I'm thinking wings of angels. Now, these are narratives and images that come to mind that are easy to understand. I'm not saying use these literally. Do not use them to pin the concepts we are trying to communicate to a common red thread narrative. It may be useful to find a less religious or specific concept to bridge the meta narrative to the more grounded narrative, which then underpins the stories we are seeking to surface through the messaging on the website. Okay. I honestly had the objective of making this a short stream today. Ended up becoming quite an expose on how to do this stuff. Right. Let's roll. Okay, story archetypes, yeah. Elite squad, protective shield, watchful guardians, core promise, yep. Emotional tone, watchful, protective, visual anchor, shield coverage. Now remember, we're making this stuff up on the spot. We'd want to go through a story accelerator of Adara, where we get the founder and a couple other folks in, discover their personal stories, uncover stories of customers, speak to customers, look at all the materials, and from that generate the narrative to underpin all this stuff that can then be used for what we're doing here, rather than Matthew just making it up on the spot. But being able to make it up on the spot helps you start. And So invisible shield, move fast, stay protected. When the next breach or breakdown threatens, you don't scramble because the shield is already in place. Adara acts like a team of guardians around your ML workflows, watching, protecting, and stepping in before chaos hits. CTA, build under protection, supporting line ship, ML with speed and certainty, no firefights, no surprise alerts. And then the Guardian Collective, you're not alone in the fight. Most ML teams are exposed, fragile pipelines, strained ops, security, laptops, weak links. Adara is your unseen group of guardians stepping in before things break. I could already see the feedback, like, well, but we're not like literally stepping in, it's the software. It's like, okay, well, we have to start somewhere, and that's something to react to, right? And we could shift that to become like a force, right? That flows through the system, right? That reacts like an energy. Like there's different visuals and different metaphors that we can use. Wings that cover, step into the safety of coverage. Feels a little bit too much like an insurance company to me, but workflows, protective wings of reliability and security, and even just wings. It's too literal. But anyway, that, my friends, is how we can take some of the stuff that we love about the power of the web, right? Be this place that we can put our best foot forward, that we can even test, A/B test, right? It's one of the great things about the web as well, and digital. And then we can take those and then use those to upgrade the narrative that we're testing. And that can benefit things like our keynotes, our pitches, our pitch competitions, our onboarding, our recruitment process, all of that good stuff. And it shows that, yes, you can use the power of story when it comes to a technical audience, right? And in fact, you have to, because you have to understand their story. And knowing they're different is okay. You're going to talk to them in a different way. It's why we're looking at quotes out there from people who live and breathe this stuff, right? And then working to engineer something from that. And that's your opportunity, is to engineer the story. So deep dive today on doing the teardown, highly focused. Hope you got some ideas out of this. Love to hear what those ideas are, what questions you have. Comment below, send me a DM. I reply to every DM. And we can continue the conversation and hear about what it is that you're working on, that you would like to take to the next level, connect better, and cut through the noise with clarity and have a better story that you're proud of and get excited about. So thank you so much for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. See you next Friday. Bye for now. You might want to know where to go. And I did say DM. You can also email here. And of course, that's the website too. So you can go to the website, you can shoot us an email, and you can go do the story assessment on the website. I would absolutely recommend going and doing the story assessment. Business questions, but it will give you the type of story that's the most important for you to be telling right now. It's like it's a framework, it's a structure. Like the pivot is one of them, right? So if it turns out that the pivot is the right story type, it's an umbrella. It's a framework that you can use to shape what you're doing. So thank you so much. Stop by the site, take that 10-minute test, shoot us an email, comments in it below, send a DM, and can't wait to hear what your questions are about trying to do a better job, cutting through the noise, connecting with clarity, tell that better story after you figured out what you should be telling. Bye for now.